Hello there, friends, true believers, and newcomers alike. Hope you're doing well. Superfly Comics Guy here. As you know, last time we looked at Injustice Omnibus Volume 1, so as promised, here we are with Injustice, Gods Among Us, Omnibus Volume 2. We'll be taking a look at the cover, the spine, the contents collected, the build quality, and of course a flip through where I can share some of my thoughts, opinions, and recommendations with you guys. So, if you like the video, you know how to show it, and if you're a nerd like me, feel free to start a discussion down there by leaving your own thoughts. So yeah, as you know, I gave Volume 1 of this series a glowing recommendation, so now it is time to ask the question, is this as good as Volume 1? Better? Worse? Well, let's see. Alrighty, so here we are featuring the dust jacket of the Injustice Omnibus Volume 2. Once again, we have a similar design here, a matte finish for the dust jacket itself as opposed to a glossy one. No variant covers or anything like that. This is the only one available. I'm not a huge fan of this cover, I'll be honest. I like the artwork, but I don't think it's a good cover, if you kind of catch my drift. Like, with Volume 1, I really liked it because it really sells you on the concept of the story. You can feel the conflict between Batman and Superman on that cover. This just kind of looks like a generic team-up book, Justice League book. Like, it doesn't really indicate the conflict that is going on in this series. But anyway, here's the spine. Once again, this will look gorgeous alongside Volume 1 when they're both on the shelf together. Really good design on this, these two omnibuses. And the back here, we have a cover price of $125 US, $163 Canadian. And this volume collects Injustice Gods Among Us Year 4, 1 through 12. Gods Among Us Year 4 Annual number 1. Year 5, 1 through 20. That one's an extra long year. And then we have Injustice Year 5 Annual and Injustice Ground Zero 1 through 12. So yeah, this is Injustice Omnibus Volume 2, not Injustice 2. Not to be, because I can see how that might be confusing. We are still before the Injustice 1 video game. Let's flip this over, have a look under the dust jacket. There we are. Once again, we got a similar idea here, a zoomed in image of the dust jacket. Speaking of which, I do quickly want to show you guys the flaps here, the design. Very, very nice. Just conflicting images, Superman and Batman. This war has already cost too much. It's over. And then Batman, it's not over. Very nicely done. But yeah, let me open up this wraparound cover here for you just to show you what that looks like. And there you go. So yeah, same image as the cover of the dust jacket, just a little bit zoomed in. And once again, I'll give the same kind of notice that I gave in my Volume 1 review. You may notice some damage on my particular book. Don't be alarmed, that's just my copy. We have Amazon to thank for that. I'm pretty sure Mr. Bezos himself was instructed to run this particular book over with his own tractor, so that was fun. Fun for me to deal with, but anyway, let's dive into this, shall we? All right. Cracking open the book. As you can see, once again, similar to Volume 1, we have this these bookend pages here featuring some characters from Batman's team. Oh, there's Batwoman, Batgirl. They're awesome in this series. Let me flip to the back as well, and you can see characters from Superman's team. So it's nice to see they kept that design motif from Volume 1. But anyway, let's continue on. Injustice Omnibus Volume 2. Here we got an introduction by Brian Buccellato, who takes over the writing duties for this this volume here, taking over from Tom Taylor. And then towards the end, Chris Sapella finishes off this omnibus here. But there we go. So, one of my biggest complaints from Injustice Omnibus Volume 1 was the inconsistency of the art. It was sometimes great, sometimes embarrassingly bad. Now, don't get me wrong, I totally understand why the art in Volume 1 was so hit or miss, because at the time this was coming out, the Injustice series was a digital weekly comic book series, not bi-weekly, not monthly, weekly. It was being published weekly, so that's about the quickest possible sustainable pace at which you can publish an ongoing series. So you usually have to get cycling artists, and, you know, I understand why in that case certain corners would be cut, like with lackluster art. But, you know, at the end of the day, I still have to review the final product that came from it. So let's get something out of the way. I think this volume is much, much better in that regard. More consistent for sure. You definitely still get weird continuity moments, like, because they do still cycle between artists all the time from issue to issue. So sometimes an artist will draw Batwoman one way, and then in the next issue, she'll look, her cowl will look completely different. So there are still some continuity issues in here, but in general, the art is more consistent here. But I will say the first Omni had higher highs in terms of the art, but definitely lower lows. Whereas this one just kind of keeps a consistent level all throughout. Bruno Redondo in particular, I would say, is the standout artist in here. And I also really liked Tom Derenick's work in this volume. But yeah, if you're familiar with Volume 1, the structure of this omnibus is very, very similar. You know, because we have, this contains Year 4, Year 5, and then Ground Zero, which I'll get into later. So I'm going to try to be as vague as I can about, you know, the story, because I assume not everybody has read Volume 1 yet. But I'll just say after Injustice Year 3, which is where the first volume leaves off, both sides are feeling the pain. They're in a very rough spot. They've been fighting this conflict, you know, Superman's team versus Batman's team for, you know, 3 years now, and they're just exhausted. They just want it to be over. But, you know, we saw that line from Batman, it's not over. So Batman has a plan. He decides to recruit the gods of Olympus to challenge Superman, get them on his side. Because, you know, if you're going to go up against a god, why not have some gods on your side, right? It's funny, Brian Buccellato actually comments on this. He's like, you know, I just wanted an excuse to include some mythology in these stories, you know, because Brian Buccellato says he's a big fan of Greek mythology and all that, so he had some fun with that. The epilogue of Year 4 is pretty cool because Tom Taylor returns for a pretty fantastic issue. But yeah, I don't want to spoil too much about that, other than I mentioned that in Volume 1, Injustice Omnibus Volume 1, that was all about progressive escalation and Superman's transition from a protector of Earth to an enforcer. Now this volume, he goes from enforcer to full-blown nutjob dictator. And, you know, that starts to have an effect on the regime team, you know, Superman's group of heroes, those following him, because, you know, they start to sow, the seeds of doubt are starting to be sown. You can see certain characters questioning whether, you know, are we doing the right thing? Are we the good guys, or are we the bad guys in this? And it's like, you know, it's tough because it's not that one side is right, because, you know, both sides start to, like, for example, recruit villains, but, you know, there's this really funny moment, for example, where Plastic Man shows up for a little bit because he's got a little subplot in this omnibus, and he shows up to all the regime guys and just points at Superman and goes, dude, he's sitting on a literal throne. How blind are all you guys? Why are you following this guy? That was pretty funny. But anyway, then we get into Year 5 here, which is the final year before the events of the Injustice 1 video game. And I gotta be honest, Year 5 is where stuff starts to get pretty messy. You may have noticed when I was going over the contents, we have 20 chapters or 20 issues in Year 5. And a lot of those are just like very rapid fire issues to try to catch up to the game story as quickly as possible, or that's kind of how it felt. Because we had moments like, oh shoot, Metropolis is destroyed. Okay, quickly, we got to rebuild it. Ta-da, Metropolis is rebuilt. And it's like, you know, because Metropolis was a stage in the Injustice 1 fighting game, so they have to explain stuff like that. Yeah, it gets a little messy with some of its storytelling here. And then I mentioned after that, we have Ground Zero. Now, Ground Zero actually recounts the events of the Injustice 1 video game. Because the game had done so well, I guess the guys over at WB or DC were like, you know what, why don't we have a series for the game as well? And I was pretty excited to read that, but there's a twist. Ground Zero doesn't exactly recount the events of the game. Well, it does, but it's all told from Harley Quinn's perspective. And I don't know how I feel about that, because one of the biggest strengths about the Injustice 1 game is that you're constantly switching locations and characters, and you're getting different perspectives, like, you know, what's going on with Aquaman in Atlantis? How is he reacting to all of this? What is Green Lantern up to? What is Batman up to? You know, all these different characters. But when you write Ground Zero from the perspective of Harley Quinn, you lose out on a lot of that. I mean, don't get me wrong, the story, it still follows the story of the game, but the tone is off because everything is written from Harley Quinn's perspective. It doesn't really quite fit into the storytelling that the other years followed. I don't know, I just found that quite strange, to be honest. And once again, because it's all from her perspective, they have to throw in other stuff to kind of fill in the story. So Harley has this subplot where she's trying to build up her own gang, become her own person, separate from the Joker. And I don't know. I mean, the writing in Ground Zero, I guess, gets kind of better towards the end, but I don't know. It definitely expects you to be familiar with the story of the Injustice 1 video game. It's constantly jumping around from one event to the other, and I don't know. It didn't quite fit for me. Now, I do have some other minor complaints, just as I did with Volume 1. Like, I'm still not a fan of how some characters are written. I think Damian is still insufferable. He's just a whiny, entitled jerk. Harley herself is written pretty weird. There's this bit in, I think, year 4 where she just starts making all these weird Hunger Games references, quotes. She's generally written pretty ditzy and dumb. There's this weird sort of subplot where she has like this crush on Shazam, but like only the Shazam version, not Billy Batson. I don't know. It was really creepy. But I do think Wonder Woman's writing gets a little bit more tolerable than she was in Volume 1. But then the issue with that is that doesn't really line up with how she was portrayed in the game. So it's like, I don't know, because I didn't feel like she was particularly well written in the video game. But then she's written a little bit better here, but then she has to regress again when she's written in the video game. I don't know, it's kind of strange that way. The other minor complaint I have is I was really, really hoping that this omnibus would explain how Superman gets his crazy new evil-looking High Counselor outfit, because it's pretty sinister looking, but they don't explain it. He just suddenly shows up one day wearing that new outfit, and we're just supposed to be like, okay, moving on. Like, come on, that could have been such a huge opportunity for some added depth, like him changing his costume, explaining why he's going for this sinister new look. But no, they just kind of glaze over it and move past it. I don't know, I feel like that was such a wasted opportunity. But anyway, here we are taking a look at some of the variant covers here in the extras section. Yeah, pretty standard extra section. It's quite chunky, just as the Volume 1 was. We got some variant covers, some character designs, as you can see here. Some layouts, quite a few layouts actually. Pretty hefty extra section. I'm not going to go into detail of all of them, but still pretty interesting. Let's see. There you go. So mostly just variant covers, character designs, and layouts. Moving on to build quality, I can tell you this omnibus has 1,104 pages, just like Volume 1. And again, build quality is really solid. You saw that very big eye that we have. Pages are nice and thick. Not too much gutter loss. Just a little bit towards the beginning and end. And again, no table of contents or page numbers, but just as with Volume 1, that didn't bother me because it's basically just one big ongoing story the whole time, and it's split up into chapters, so you never really feel lost while you're reading. It's a very, very good build quality. But now it's time to wrap up with some closing thoughts. So, with Volume 2 of Injustice, people tend to hate on this volume quite a bit, but I still found this to be pretty entertaining. Sure, not as good as Volume 1, but even so, the character work here is still pretty solid, and even though I've played the games, the Injustice video games, I found myself so badly just wanting Batman's insurgency to succeed, but it just seems like they can't catch a break. They keep suffering setback after setback, and that just tells me I was invested in the story. But again, that's because I read Volume 1. I don't think it really makes sense to read this volume on its own because you'll be missing a large chunk of the story. So I'd say if you enjoyed Volume 1, then I think it's worth continuing on and giving Volume 2 a try as well. If you weren't so crazy about Volume 1 or you just didn't like it at all, I'd say there's no point checking out Volume 2 because it's simply not as strong. But anyway, that has been my review of the Injustice Omnibus Volume 2. Let me know what you thought about the book, the review, the video game, anything, whatever you want. Leave your comments down below and I'll be happy to have a discussion with you. But thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to catch you in another video real soon. Possibly my December haul, finally. But I hope you have yourself a great day. I've been Superfly Comics Guy, and until next time, you guys keep reading. See ya.